Hey guys, today we are reading Acts chapter 27. So if you remember Friday on 26, we left off with basically King Agrippa telling Governor Festus that Paul was innocent, right? And he said, you could have let him go if he would not ask to see Caesar. But he did. And so we pick up today, and they decided on a date to sail to Italy, to Rome, to see Caesar. Okay. And so we can see here in verse 2, and embarking on a ship, they were about to sail their post, the coast of Asia. But notice this little word. It says, we put to sea, accompanied by Articus or Augustus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica. You see that word we? Luke was there, right? The guy who's writing the book of Acts, the same Luke who wrote the Gospel of Luke, he's here, right? So Luke is here, so he's witnessing all of this. And so the next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul kindly. The centurion that was overseeing Paul to Caesar, he treated him kindly and gave him leave to go to his friends and be cared for. Remember, Paul is innocent. He's not guilty, even though he's still under arrest because he has to go see Caesar because that's what he requested to do. He's not guilty. There's no conviction coming from King Agrippa or from Festus, right? So he's innocent. So this guard is giving him a lot of leeway, right? So he's able to see some of his friends and some followers of Christ, and they put out to sea, and they're starting to see around the island of Cyprus. The winds were against them, so they came along the coast, and they came to a place of Lucaia or Lycra, or Lycia. They're all the same places, just depending on how you want to pronunciate it. There the centurion found the ship of Alexandria sailing for Italy and put us on board. So the ship is the ship of Alexandria. It's a grain freight, and we know from history that Egypt would grow all of the grain and wheat, because they were, think of like North African, right? They're right on the equator. They almost have a 365 crop day, right? So they're always growing. They're never out of season. And so they would grow a lot of wheat and grain there, and then they would ship it up to Italy and to Rome. And so he jumps aboard one of these kind of freighters. And we know from history telling us that these freighters, just to put in your mind, they're about 140 feet long and 36 feet wide. Okay. This is a monster ship. Okay. This is a big ship. It's not a little rowboat. This is a pretty big ship, weighed down with wheat, that is headed toward Rome. It says they sailed slowly for a number of days because they were so heavy, and arrived with difficulty off Sidus, and as the wind did not allow, they did not go further. Coasting along with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near which was the city of Lasaya. And so if you would look up a picture of Cyprus, right, it's just kind of out there, and it has some inlets and some outlets. And so basically what's happening is they're sailing along. They're in a heavy ship, but because it's getting late in the years, they're not getting the winds in the direction that they need. They're coming the opposite direction. So they're going against the winds. Now, today, that's not a big deal. You just turn on the motors and go, right? But when you're back then and you have to go with the wind, or rowing, which this is a monster ship way down, nobody's rolling anything. They're kind of up to the weather, right? So they're kind of starting too late for this trip, and we'll see that as we continue to read. Since much time has passed, the voyage was now dangerous because even the fast was already over. You see that word fast, and it's capitalized. Um, what's interesting is I can tell you the exact day of this day. The fast is October 5th of 59 AD. How do I know that? It's the Day of Atonement. It's the Day of Atonement. You can just look back on a calendar, and so here he's just saying Paul knows it's the end of the season, right? Paul is not a sailor. He's a tent maker. He's a Pharisee. He's part of the Sanhedrin. He's a lawyer. He's a smart guy. But remember what Paul did. As he did all of his missionary journeys, he traveled almost 4,000 miles across these waterways, right? He's learned something in the past 20 plus years of sailing these waters, right? And so he even knows, hey, it's too late. It's too late to start this journey. Let's stay there, wait till spring arrives, and then we will go. Once again, he's not delaying anything. He's not purposely delaying. You remember, he's innocent, right? He's innocent. He can do whatever he wants as long as he checks in with the centurion. So he's not like delaying his execution or his imprisonment. He really wants to go see Caesar, but he knows it's too late. The wind and the weather is against us, right? So let's stay here. Now it's called Fair Havens, and that's kind of a false name. Fair Havens is a good place to stop. Even today, you can take a cruise ship and stop in Fair Havens. It's a nice place. But in the wintertime, it's not a nice place because all of the wind is coming from the north, and it just basically beats the boats in that little kind of inlet, right? And so what happens? So Paul tells them, hey, we shouldn't do this, right? If we do this, we're gonna lose a lot of things. We're gonna lose a lot of the boat. People's gonna get hurt. We could even die. But the centurion, verse 11, paid more attention to the pilot and to the owner of the ship than what Paul said, right? These are the professionals, right? So the centurion listens to them, and the harbor was not suitable. This was not a place that you want to spend the winter in on your ship. It's going to be blowing in on the docks. It's going to be beating its own self up. So as they basically say, hey, we want to get to the harbor of Phoenix. The harbor of Phoenix is only 40 miles around the side of the island. It's not that far. It's really not an impossible journey. It's not like they're going all the way back out to the sea. They just want to skirt the coast to get around where it is blocked by the wind and spend the winter there, and then when spring arrives and the favorable winds come, right, then they'll go up. And so the owner of the ship and the sailor, the captain, says that's what we're going to do, right? So the centurion listens to him. But we see Paul was right. When the south wind blew, what happened? Basically, it's beating the boat. They lost all control. A tempest, a great storm comes, and basically they're lost at sea. They're not lost. They can see the island, but they have no direction of where they're going. The sea is just pushing them for 14 days, right? So for 14 days, even verse 16, it says that it got so bad that they brought the ship's boat on the ship. We would call this today a skip, right? They would have a big boat, and then they had like a little rowboat behind in case if it got in trouble, if it got hung up, or if they came close to a coast, they could not beach the ship, but they could anchor down, and then they could get in the rowboat and go ashore and get supplies or material or whatever they needed, right? So it was so bad they had to pull this skip on the board. Not only that, in verse 17, it says, after they hoisted it up, they used supports to undergird the ship. This means they took ropes and cables completely around the ship, right? Making belts, basically, belting the ship together so that when the storms would come, it would not break the ship apart. And this is a bad, bad storm, right? These are professional sailors. They know what to do. But this is a bad storm. It says that this violent storm tossed them about. They started to jettison the cargo, which makes them lighter, which makes the boat rise higher in the water so it won't capsize. And on the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. So they threw everything they didn't need overboard. When neither the sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope of being saved was last abandoned. We'll find out a few verses later that there's 276 people on board, and here it says they all lost hope. They all knew that they were going to die. And you could imagine what that scene would be like, right? Everybody just knows this is the end of their life. They're going to drown at sea. You can imagine how bad that would be, right? What happens? Paul stood up among them and said, "Hey, take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you from only the ship." And Paul stands up and says, nobody's going to die. Only the ship is going to be hurt. Nobody's going to die. Who are you? You're somebody who's a prisoner. Who are you? How can you say this? And then he says, for that very night, an angel of the Lord comes to him and says, "Do not be afraid. You're going to see before Caesar, and everybody's going to be safe," right? So take heart, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as he told them. Right? So he says, hey, an angel came and told me, and I believe in God that he's going to keep his word. But notice verse 26. But, right? Everybody's going to be safe, but we must run aground on some island. Now, to run aground in a little boat is not that big a deal, right? Sometimes you do it, right? You just run a boat on shore, you jump off, maybe you go to the bathroom, you go get food, you eat a picnic, and then you push it off. When you're in a big ship, and you run aground, it doesn't mean you're coasting up on a nice sand shore. There's reefs, there's coral. When it says runs aground, it means your boat is going to get broke up. It's going to get shattered. It's going to be beating the waves. You're going to have to swim through all of that coral, through the reefs, through the waves. It's not a good thing, right? It's not a good thing at all. And it says, but that's what's got to happen. So when 14 nights had come, they were being driven across the Adriatic Sea, and midnight the sailors suspect they were nearing land. They were probably hearing breakers, the waves breaking on a shore, so they knew they were getting close. And so it said they let out some rope and they tried to see, right? They're getting soundings. They would have a big weight on a rock. They would go down and they say, okay, we're 20 fathoms deep. And then it kept going further. We're 15, we're 10, right? They know they're getting closer and closer to shore. And so we can see in verse 30, the sailors were seeking to escape from the ship because they know they're getting close. It's about to get broke up. And so they lowered the skip back down, right? And so Paul tells them, said to the centurion soldier, unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved. He says, if everybody does not trust the words of God, everybody's going to die. Right? So what happens? The soldiers cut away the ropes of the ships of the boat and let it go. So even in this moment of panic, the soldiers show faith in what Paul has said that this angel told him, right? So they cut away the skip so that nobody could escape. As day was about to go, Paul urges them to take some food, get some nourishment. They do. Notice it says, and he had taken the bread and he broke it and he give thanks, right? What does that sound like? It's the Last Supper, right? Communion, right? It's what he's doing. He's giving thanks to all that's happening, even in this bad time, right? And they were all encouraged. We can see there that there was 276 persons on the ship. And then what happens, right? Now the shipwreck. When it was day, they did not know where they were at, didn't recognize the land, but they noticed a bay with a beach. So they said, that's where we're going to go. That's where we're headed, right? And so that's where they tried to run the ship ashore. So they cut off the anchors so it would blow in, but it hit on some coral on a reef. It got stuck. And now as the waves are coming in, it's just beating it and starting to break it apart, right? And so with that, the soldiers, verse 42, plan was to kill all of the prisoners, lest any of them would swim away and escape. Right? It would be deadly for a soldier to show up to Rome without his prisoner. They would kill the soldier, right? And so they were just going to kill the prisoners to say that they were all dead, right? They were executed. But notice this, verse 43, Paul's centurion wishing to save Paul, right? He had this ability. He had this relationship with Paul. He had this kind of belief in Paul and maybe even in Paul's God that, man, this isn't, we need to do this, right? So because he wanted to protect Paul, he had to protect all the prisoners, right? So what happened? They ordered the ones that could swim, jump aboard and swim towards the beach. Those who couldn't, grab some wood, jump overboard and rod the wood in, and everybody meet on the beach. And we see in the end of verse 44, and so it was that all were brought safely to land, just as God, with the help of an angel, told Paul that all would live and none would perish. And it's exactly what happened, right? So you have to imagine when they get to the beach, not only how happy are they living, but now they're starting to see what Paul is saying is true. And he's going to Rome because why? Because he has belief in this God, in this resurrected Jesus, who is now verified what Paul has said, that they're all going to live, right? So we will see you tomorrow for the last chapter of Acts, in Acts chapter 28. God bless.